Yeah, so please go ahead and those who just came in, we're gonna be using some files that are stored in a Google Drive folder I set up. So that link will take you there. You just have to download them to your computer. All right, so welcome everyone to the first MathQuantum professional development workshop that we're holding for this program. Today we're going to be talking about vector graphics and particularly in the context of using them within Adobe Illustrator, which is a tool that you can use to edit and to create and edit vector graphics. And we're going to dive right into it. So the first thing that I want to do is kind of get a sense of from the audience about your level of knowledge about what vector graphics are. So who has sort of like in an aware way worked with vector graphics before? So in any case, one way in which we can think about vector graphics is by comparing them to their widespread counterpart, which is bitmap-based graphics. And the basic idea is that vector-based graphics are rendered on your screen, or before they are being printed, they are rendered by using mathematical formulas that are behind the scenes, giving information to your computer to create a given visual. That's opposed to a bitmap graphic in which you are defining it by putting pixels on the screen, and that's whatever you see is just pixels of different colors that are positioned in a given location. We're gonna get, once we go into Illustrator, you're gonna get a more detailed sense of what I mean by all of this. But sort of like a practical way in which I like showing this is that because so I have two circles here. One of them I created internally in PowerPoint, and it's a vector graphic. It's a circle that's being rendered on the screen live, and the other one is just a circle that was a bitmap, so it's made out of pixels. And so like because of resolution, that bitmap graphic will have a limit to how much detail it has stored in it. So if I enlarge this circle sufficiently, you start seeing that when it was small, it looked like a pretty smooth circle. But when I'm enlarging it, you start seeing this blurriness because the pixels are becoming larger themselves, right? So there's a specific amount of information stored as pixels there. And when I start enlarging this image, you see the pixels themselves. That's opposed to the vector circle, which again, it's being rendered constantly based on an equation that defines the circle. So that when I enlarge it, it just recreates that circle again based on the equation, and you don't see that pixelation, no matter how large I make it. All right. So that's one very pragmatic way of thinking about vector graphics. So why would we be interested in talking about these things, and why do we care? So the first thing is that because of this idea that a vector graphic is being defined by a set of equations, it's just like a set of formulas that are stored in a file instead of a bunch of pixels. If I have something that I wanted to be really high resolution, if I wanted that circle for me to be able to enlarge it a lot and not look like it's pixelated, it would have to be a really large file. Meanwhile, a vector file is just the same equation regardless of what size that circle is, right? Because of a similar idea, then you can scale up or down your vector files and then transfer them without losing data. Bitmaps, if we're really detailed about this, there are some files that are better about this than others. But when you enlarge something and then like make it smaller again, and then you transfer the file, you're losing information. All right. In a vector file, same formula transfers, and then you don't lose anything. And in any case, from the point of view of someone that is trying to create some graphics for your research or for like your academic work or whatever, you have a more refined control while you're creating these things, because if you're trying to create, I mean, there are some tools that allow you to like have some level of control with bitmap, but generally when you think of bitmap, it's like you're thinking more on the side of like, I just have a pen, even if it's a digital pen, and I'm drawing things, right? So you're thinking more like, do I have like some set of artistic skills that allow me to create this thing? Well, when you're working with vector graphics, typically the programs tend to be set up in a way that allows you to modify things, modify parameters in a mathematical manner, so that you can create different types of visuals without necessarily having that barrier of like the artistic skill or something like that. So I guess I didn't add that here, but another why vector graphics reason is that some journals will request for you to send files in these formats. So it's good to be familiar with these things and know what is bitmap, what is vector, and when to use it and how to use it and how to like navigate giving people files that are in these formats. Right, so another reason is that, so getting a little bit more pragmatic and like how you implement this is that when you create vector graphics, or like when you have the capacity to create and edit vector graphics and you know how to do it well, it makes it easy for you to integrate plots and other types of visuals. So this is an example where you just have like a composite figure for a paper where you created a plot that, like the data has to be very specifically set in this graph, right, by a program that you use to plot, but then you're creating some things that maybe you don't have any other software to create it, or is not plots, and you can sort of like integrate them all together into this composite figure. Or even further, then you can start sort of like creating elements on top of plots, like that integrate things even more dynamically, so that, like, for example, here you created this plot in some sort of software, but you're sort of like creating these connections with another set of plots that you created with these arrows here. So you can sort of like create these composite images that allow you to present information in a more effective and efficient way. And then furthermore, you can then also start putting together complex figures that blend plots with diagrams or different like things that you created with this, which is a bitmap file. So combining bitmap and vector graphics. All right. Another reason is that, again, going back a little bit back to this idea that like you don't need, there's not as high of like a artistic skill barrier to vector graphics, is that you can create a very nice polished aesthetic look that, things that you see in textbooks or like the typical like nature magazine like look, without really knowing that much or like having that much of like an artistic background, just because you can manipulate these parameters in a very like mathematical and systematic way. So you can create things like this. I would say that like with what you're gonna learn today, if we get through the whole thing today, you should be able to put together most of the stuff that is in this visual here. Not this one. This has a little bit more complex things, but things like this also, like the aesthetic polished look. Again, another example of this just from a paper. And then I did want to give a shout out to one of the people in the audience here, Nolan Cole, who is from the CS department, a graduate student there, who he created these things using Illustrator, so like using vector graphics. So this is sort of like kind of like shows you what the types of things you can create, and then like these are diagrams that have been used, some for publication, but some just for internal communication with peers and things like that. All right. So in order to create and edit vector graphics, there are different options that you have. So the one that we're going to be using today is Illustrator. It's a tool made by Adobe. It's sort of like one of the most well-developed and sort of like I guess one of the strongest tools that are out there. But and it's available for Mac and Windows, but it does have a cost for using it. But it is important to keep in mind that, this is a tool that might not be accessible to you depending on where you are, what institution you are, and your financial situation. So with that said, Inkscape is another one. It's sort of like maybe the second biggest one out there. And that one is free, it's open source, and it's also available for Linux, not just Mac and Windows. And it will mostly do all the same stuff. It has actually gotten much better since I started sort of like doing this type of tutorial and comparing the tools. It's gotten a lot better, but it still has a little bit of clunkiness to it. So that's why I sort of like tend to go for Illustrator as let's learn vector graphics with this, and then once you know the basics, you can go and like try other software. PowerPoint, as I showed you with that circle, it also, you can create vector graphics within PowerPoint. All of those little boxes that you draw, all the text that you put on PowerPoint, it is vector based. So it can do it. And then there's online apps that are starting to pop up. Things like Vector, Vectoring, Figma, Canva. I haven't used all of them. Some of them are good, some of them are just very simple. But I wanted to make you aware that like you don't need to download things to be able to create some of these things. So why wouldn't we just use PowerPoint, which is kind of like typically a tool that you're already using, Google Slides and PowerPoint, I guess like maybe I'm using those interchangeably here. It's a tool you're already using for putting together presentations. Why wouldn't we just use that in the first place? The main thing is that it's more limited. You don't have as many tools, and you're not able to customize your vector art as much as something like Illustrator and Inkscape. However, everything that you learn today, not everything, but a lot of the things that you're going to learn today can be like replicated in PowerPoint. It just maybe takes a few more steps or a more customization. But you can achieve pretty nice looking things with PowerPoint. It just like takes a little bit longer for someone that already knows Illustrator and Inkscape, which do have like a barrier of entry. And then an important one is that, and this goes back a little bit to your question, exporting things from PowerPoint is not as good for in terms of the quality of the image. So if you're trying to export something in PowerPoint that you created, which like let's say that circle that I created, which was vector, if I'm going to export it as a bitmap, my limit is 300 dots per inch. We're not going to get into the details of what dot per inch means, although the name is kind of intuitive in what it means. But some journals are asking you to export as up to 1200 dpi. And yes, maybe some people that are knowledgeable know that there are ways to like go into like your registry and change the limit that PowerPoint has, but that's like that, and you can't even do that in Mac anyway. So in any case, just for exporting, if you're trying to like create publication ready things, PowerPoint might not be the ideal way to do it just because of those limits. And then if you are exporting something as a vector, so that circle that I created, if I still want it to be calculated as an equation rendered live outside of PowerPoint, you can only export as PDF. And as I'm going to show you in the next slide, there are various types of files that are vector based. There are some limitations to just being able to export as PDF. And also when you export, it's not very reliable. Like it creates, let's say I have a circle, but it's transparent, and another circle that's not transparent. It might like kind of mess things around. And when you export it and move it to another program or something like that, it might not give you the results that you were expecting. So in any case, PowerPoint is not ideal, but it does, have some capabilities there. And I'm happy to talk to people about using PowerPoint for different, different specific needs. So these are some common files. I just wanted for you to be aware of that they exist, especially because when you're working with like MATLAB or like any sort of like plugin software that you're using, these will be some of the options available for you to export things. So one of them is FPG, scalable vector graphics. Another one is EPS, encapsulated PostScript. Another one that I like mentioning is WMF or EMF. These are a Windows metafile or a newer version called Windows Enhanced Metafile. And I like to mention that because if you have the option, if you're like working interchangeably between something that you're creating in another software and PowerPoint, PowerPoint is nicely compatible with WMFs and EMFs, and not as compatible with like some PDFs. So whenever you have access to WMF, EMF, and you're like really working a lot in PowerPoint, it might be a good idea to use a file and like export a file in that format. Just as and then PDFs also can contain vector art, but I do want to emphasize for these two latter ones, just because something is a PDF doesn't mean that it's everything inside of it is vector, all right? So you can have a PDF that is fully rasterized, meaning it's all bitmap, it's all like a bunch of pixels. So what's contained in the PDF is what matters, and you know, whatever, you know, whichever output you obtain when exporting something, that depends on the settings that you're using to export a file. So you have to be careful that when you're exporting something into a PDF file, that you're checking the right boxes so that it exports into vector file, into vector format. And again, this might sound abstract if you haven't seen it as an example or anything like that, but if you have like practical like instances in which you're doing any of these, I'm happy to like serve as a resource to help you with what are the right settings for you to export things properly. All right, so we're gonna get down into the tutorial. Background is over. Any questions on sort of like the background? And then I do have a set of slides that I have put together. Those are available upon request. It's basically like the tutorial itself, but with screenshots of all the steps. If you think that would be useful, email me and I can share. So in terms of participating, feel free to, if this is better for you, just watch the process, take notes. Otherwise, you can just follow along and do the same steps that I'm going. But either way, whatever you decide to do, if you're stuck or behind at any point, don't hesitate to raise your hand and say like, hey, you know, like I got stuck here. Can we go back and like see, you know, what happened? Because whenever tutorials happen, different settings, different computers might behave differently. So I want to make sure that you don't get left behind and then just like completely lose track of what we're doing. All right, does that all sound good? And so if anyone came late, sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier, but anyone that hasn't done it, please go to that link over there and go .umd.edu/mqvectorp124 and download the files that are contained in that drive folder. These are files that we're going to be using throughout the tutorial. So let's go ahead and open Adobe Illustrator. And what you should see is something like this. Right, and we are going to create a new file. So there should be a button that allows you to create a new file. When you click that, it creates a new window where you set some parameters for creating files. We're gonna go ahead and so you have different like categories up here that allow you to, depending on the use that you have. We're gonna go to print, and we're gonna pick the letter. That's just because, you know, it's sort of like exemplifying the page of a paper or something like that. So when you do that, it's going to tell you what width and what height it's going to be. And I have it set up points. You might see a different unit, but here you can actually change the units that it's going to use for all of the other to communicate with you about like what you're doing within the software. And so like some people, if you're working on a paper and you want to know exactly like how wide your figure is to make sure that you're fitting within the column, it might be useful to work in inches or in centimeters or something like that. Feel free to pick whatever unit you want. This is not going to matter too much for this tutorial. I'm going to keep it with points. And then all of these other things are some defaults that we're not going to get into, but I'm happy to talk to you about it if you want to get deeper into like what all of this means. Even if you weren't able to access the print and letter, as long as you create a new document, you're good to go for following to the next steps of this tutorial. And that's because in some ways, the starting size of your document is not super important because you can change that size inside of Illustrator. And I'll show you that in a second. So let's go ahead and create. And what you should see is something like this, which is going to be this white rectangle surrounded by gray or sea of gray. In order for everyone to be with at least similar, if not the same kind of like layout, let's go ahead and go to Window, and then Workspace, and then make sure that what you're using is Essential Classics or Essentials Classic. And when you do that, you should see something similar to what I have here, which is some sort of menu on the top, some sort of bar on the left, and then another bar on the right, and then that's surrounding your canvas. Just in case, if you're not seeing that, the first thing that I would suggest doing is to go to Workspace again and ask it to reset Essentials Classic, which I'm gonna do, and it's not doing anything because it was the default. So yeah, like I said, well, actually, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna save. So we're gonna just go ahead and save your document, you know, Control S or File Save. And then it's you know, it's asking me cloud or computer, so I'm gonna say save to my computer, save it wherever. This is just sort of like for me to emphasize. And yeah, you can just, if it gives you this window, just tell it like keep the defaults and say okay. This is for me just to emphasize the importance of saving your files and saving your progress as you go. Once you save, the default settings for Illustrator should be that it auto saves every once in a while. But if that's not the case, you can, you know, look it up or ask me. You can go to settings and then like tell it how often to autosave. This is all important, especially like depending on what computer you have, it might not, you know, because these things are all being rendered live, like I already explained, it might be kind of like taking up some RAM from your computer. And depending on your computer and the version of Illustrator and how much art you have, it might crash. I haven't had it crash in a long time, but you know, it can happen. And I just want to kind of like emphasize the good practice of saving something and then like making sure any autosave features are what you want them to be. Okay, so what we have here in the Essential Classics, with this this panel at the right is what is called a context sensitive panel. So basically this thing here and what appears in it will change depending on what you have selected, or you know, like it just changes depending on what's happening, you know, what you have active in the artboard itself. So right now it's like nothing is selected, so it's just showing me like a bunch of different document settings. Here, this kind of shows how it was not that important to, like, when you were creating a file, to make some decisions, because here you can, like, for example, change the units. And then more importantly, I want you to be aware that you can change the size of your artboard. So let's go ahead and click on edit artboards. And what will happen then is that like that panel will change, and it will tell you how wide and how tall your artboard is in the units that you had selected. And then you can just like enter different numbers here to make it whatever points you want. If you're like doing if you're creating a figure that has to be a specific number of centimeters wide, you can change that here so that, like, you know, okay, like whatever I'm putting together is going to fit within that that size. And so you can enter numbers, you can, these boxes that allow you to change the dimensions of something in Illustrator also take very basic arithmetics. So you can also tell it that you want your height to be 123 times 4, and then it'll make that, right? So you can use, if you want to get really precise with the things that you're creating, you can enter a little bit of math in there. You can fix the ratio by with this tool here. Yeah. You can tell it to lock it or unlock it. So in addition to that, when you're in this editing artboard mode, you can just manually by going to the actual artboard and finding the edges, you can also just change it with your by clicking and dragging, right? So you click and drag from the top, from the corner, whatever, you know, like a typical, if you're familiar with creating things in
in any of these softwares like PowerPoint, it's very similar.
So feel free to change the artboard size, whatever you pick, as long as you don't make it really small so that like the things we're gonna import don't fit. You know, feel free to change it or not change it. I just wanted to show you that it's possible. All right, so now we're gonna go and exit that so that we, like either hit enter or actually no, just exit the artboard editing mode. There was a little thing up here in the panel, in the rightmost panel, that allow you to exit so that you log, like you tell it, like this is the size that I want and I'm done with that. And now we're gonna import a few things. So hopefully you downloaded the files that were in that folder. If not, go ahead and do that. And we're gonna go to File, Place. And we're going to find the files that you downloaded. And we're going to go ahead and import the harmonic EPS, right? Harmonic EPS. So right now, all I did was just like click the harmonic EPS once. If you click it twice, it's gonna like place it, and if you did that, it's okay. But I wanted to show you these important buttons down here. One of them is link and one of them is template. For some reason, some people's default might be with the link box checked. And if that's the case, what it's gonna do is that like the whatever file that you have placed, it's going to depend on the wherever it's stored in your hard drive. It's gonna like call it from that location whenever you open Illustrator. So if you link something, just be aware that you need to keep track of where your files are. If you don't link it, it's going to just create a new version of that inside of Illustrator. So I'm gonna unlink it. I typically work with unlinked things, but for some reasons it can be useful, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. It's just a matter of like when you plan on changing some file or something like that, it updates it automatically because it's linked. So let's unclick link, unclick template. If you make it into a template, it basically changes some of its properties for you to be able to like trace on top of it. Again, similar to many things I'm going to say today, I'm happy to talk to you in more detail about that, but we're not going to cover it today. So let's go ahead and either double click on the harmonic or just like place. And the first thing that you're going to notice is that it doesn't really like show you anything. What it did is it changed my cursor into a preview of the plot that I'm going to place. And that's just because it wants to give you the opportunity to put it in your artboard wherever you want. So wherever your arrow is, and then you click, it's going to place it. So I'm just gonna go a little bit to like the left and top, and then place it by clicking. So you all should now have a plot that has been imported into Illustrator, and it should have these kind of like things that are around it that I'm gonna explain later. You zoom in with Command plus or minus to zoom out, or with all the way to the left, you should see a magnifying glass that you can click on it, and then similar to other programs, you can click in, and then with Alt, you make it the zoom out version. And right now, if anybody didn't catch that, I'm gonna go over zooming in a little bit anyway. There's no, as long as you can see the plot, that's fine for the next steps. So let's go to check out what the layers panel looks like. And in the Essential Classics, you should see this vertical arrangement of icons, one of which is like a little sandwich of squares. And if you click on that, it'll open your layers panel. And so that basically just shows you there's a thing called layers in Illustrator, and layers can contain elements in it, elements being like this plot, for example. So when I placed my plot, it created a layer, and it's represented here in this entry within the layers panel. The layers panel has this little eye, so like starting from left, it has a little eye, which allows you to turn on and off the visibility of everything that's inside of that layer. So if you click on the eye, your graph should disappear. I'm not sure why it's changing the whole surrounding to white. That I'm not sure that shouldn't be happening. But yeah, so like basically you can see that the plot doesn't show anymore because you hit it. The next thing over is right now it's there's nothing in it, but that actually, so the space between the eye and that blue, this little blue thing is actually a functionality that allows you, if you click on it, it should show you a lock. So that allows you to lock the whatever content is in that layer, meaning that you cannot interact with it. You cannot change its size, you cannot move it, you cannot click and select it. It's just there for you to see it. This layer is not locked and I have it selected. I can click on it and move it. Like I can, you know, if I wanted to like put it here for whatever reason, if I lock it, I cannot do anything with it anymore. So that becomes useful when you're trying to like have something as a visual reference, but you don't want to like mess with it for the moment or something like that. So in case you changed any of these settings for the time being, let's keep the plot visible and let's keep it not locked. And then next up is that blue, the little blue line is just you know, if you create more layers, it'll have different colors, and it's a way for you to like organize your layers based on color. And then it shows you an arrow that's pointing to the right that you can actually click. And when you do that, it reveals the contents of that layer. So there's multiple things that can be contained within that layer. And what you can see here is that when I did that, it just showed me one thing. But that thing inside of the layer also has an arrow, meaning that it also has things inside of it. And when I click it, it'll show me a bunch of things. And none of those things have arrows, meaning that they are their own independent, ungrouped object. So what are these things? One of them, I know it's really tiny, but maybe you can see it on your own screen. One of them is just the curve itself. A bunch of them are the numbers, my labels, or you know, like my axes, my different numbers that are parts of my axes. If I keep scrolling down, a bunch of them are that, and then at the bottom are the actual lines that are creating the axis. In addition to that, this is when we get into like the real pragmatic aspects. I created this in MATLAB and then I exported it as an EPS, and it creates, so like when I select it, I'm gonna explain maybe in more detail later what a bounding box is, but when I select it, you see that there's like there's this blue thing that appears, and it's sort of like highlighting my elements that I know exist because I can see them, which are my numbers, my actual curve, the axes and all that. But then it also has like, it expands beyond it. And that's because like it has this like invisible thing that doesn't have any, like, at least from what I can tell, it doesn't really have like any use. Which is that thing all the way at the bottom. This square all the way at the bottom, like the bottommost layer, is this like invisible thing. So in order to only select that and get rid of it, because if I keep it there, it's just gonna like maybe interrupt my flow, like, you know, my ability to like modify other objects. What I can do is I go, so that the next item up in this layer, in this layer panel, is a little circle that when I click it, it selects only that element. So when I clicked it, maybe you noticed that the numbers and the plot and all of that are not highlighted anymore. They don't have that blue, like they don't have blue lines or anything like that. That's an indication visually to me that the only thing I've selected now is this thing. And if I select it and then I hit delete, it's gonna get rid of it. And you might see that nothing happened because, like, as I said, it's just this invisible thing that like didn't really matter. So anyway, the point for me to show you this is that like to kind of like give you a sense that like when a useful use of the layers panel is to be able to identify specific objects of your art and select them with that circle. So for example, if I just want to select the -1, I found the -1 here, and then I clicked on the circle, and as you can see down there, only the -1 has a bounding box, so that's my only selection. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new layer. And to do that, you just go to the bottom of the layers panel and you see there's a square with a plus sign. And if you click it, it should create a new layer. And the default is probably going to be red. And let's go ahead and with that layer selected. So whenever you have a layer selected, it's your active layer, and whatever you do is going to like be implemented in that layer. So with that layer selected, I'm gonna go ahead and go to file. So let's do that. Go ahead, go to file place. And in this case, let's place our formula PDF. Again, double clicking it or clicking it once and clicking place. And actually, that's an unexpected result. Oh, okay. The file that you have should be okay. So the file that you have should not give you the error that I'm getting. That's because I originally exported it into my computer with a different setting. But your placed formula should look with modern computer and not with this like Arial. Is that the case? Yeah. So yeah, so now we have imported a new thing. So like basically, I'm just trying to show you that you can import equations so I created this equation with LaTeX. You can like whatever software you use to create things with LaTeX, like formulas, and as long as you export them in vector format properly, you can then take them here and use formulas, in your artwork. And then the same thing with files. And then, in order to keep them organized and all that, you can use this functionality of layers. So let's go ahead and create a new layer, another layer. And let's go ahead and lock layers 1 and 2. So the layers that have your formula and the layer that has your graph, let's lock them, and also let's make them not visible. So let's remove the little eye icon from them. Let's only keep layer 3 without the lock and with the eye icon. And let's be active on that layer, right? So let's have that layer selected. So we're gonna now go to look at this panel on the left that has a bunch of tools. We're only gonna scratch the surface today. We're gonna look at really like small number of these tools, but there's a lot of stuff here. Hoping that, by making this into a series, we're gonna get into like more advanced tools as we go into parts 2, maybe even further of this Illustrator series. So let's start with a very simple tool, which is a rectangle shaped one that you should find on the left side, a few like 5 or so items down. And let's, so we're gonna use that tool. Actually, no. Before that, I want to explain something about this panel here, which is at the bottom, we will see a square that is like filled in, and then a square behind it that is sort of like more of an outline kind of thing with at least for me, it's showing that like a red line across it. And for what this is defining, we're gonna look in detail what that means, is the fill, which is the filled in square is the fill, and the stroke of whatever object you are manipulating or creating. This will make more sense in a second, but what I want us to do now is for everyone to click on the little version of those things that is up on the lower left part, so that we all are using the default fill and stroke, which is a white fill and a black stroke. So that like there are no sort of like weirdnesses in the things that you are creating as you follow this tutorial. And now with that said, we're gonna go into the first tool. So it's the rectangle tool, but we're not gonna create a rectangle. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna, instead of just clicking on that tool, we're gonna click and hold it, and it should open another set of options, including the ellipse tool. So that's the one I want you to do. So I click and hold and go to the ellipse tool so that you have selected the ellipse tool. And I just want you to draw an ellipse, which very intuitively, like many other software, you can just like click into your canvas and drag, and it'll allow you to create an ellipse. So go ahead and do that. And in order to make it, create it, you just let go of your mouse. You might also be familiar with this. If you click and drag and before you let go, you hold shift, it'll lock the dimensions of whatever it is that you're drawing. So that instead of freely creating an ellipse, you can create a perfect circle, right? So if you hold shift, it will lock different parameters, not just size, but in other instances, I just want you to be aware that shift is a tool in which you can use in Illustrator to lock different things like angles, ratios, and things like that. So we're gonna go ahead and just hold shift while dragging in order to create a circle, and then we let go, and our circle is there in our canvas. I guess I should have mentioned that the importance of this canvas is that anything that's inside of it is what's going to show up when you print something or when you export your document. And everything that's outside is going to be lost. So that's sort of like, that's delineating the content of like whatever you will see outside of Illustrator. Okay, so in addition to just clicking and dragging, you can also, with the tool selected, with the ellipse tool selected, you can click on your artboard once, and it'll open a little window that allows you to create the object. But instead of drawing it, you can enter actual values that will inherit whatever units you have selected. So because I have points, it's allowing me to enter my, the whatever size I want for my ellipse in points. So you can also do that, and that's important because let's say that you're trying to create something very like specific, a bunch of. Obviously, this is not the way that I would do it myself because there are better ways to do this. But let's say that you wanted to create a series of circles that are half of each previous one's size or something like that. Then this would be useful because then you can create one that's like 2 pt and then another one that's like 1 pt and then so on and so on, right? So if you want precision, then I want you to be aware that you can also create things by entering numbers. And so it's just a matter of clicking once, entering the numbers you want, and then okay, and then it'll create it in your artboard. So let's go ahead and play around a little bit. I'm just gonna let you create some shapes on your artboard. Create a bunch of circles if you want. Go back to that tool and try to create other shapes, not just circles. Create rectangles. Try out what happens with the polygon tool. Try out the star tool. See what happens when you click and drag, or see what happens when you click once and get that little window with different tools. Let's, just a little bit of time for you to create a few shapes. Okay, so I created some, maybe your canvas looks something like this with some shapes and some that are overlapping each other. We want to delete these. We're only going to use the circles. So I wanted to point out the selection tool. It's sort of like your go-to. If you're ever lost and you're like, what's happening with Illustrator? Like I'm clicking and it's doing something weird. Go back to your selection tool.
It's the top left in this left side menu. It's this black arrow.
Whenever you have that active, that allows you to, as the name implies, select things. Select nothing if you click outside of, like there's no object, or clicking on each object should allow you to like select the object itself,
as I am showing here in my screen.
And let's go ahead and use that to select the different shapes that you drew and delete them other than the circles.
So let's just select and delete with your keyboard and just have a couple of circles. And then when you have something selected, then that's how you copy and paste it. So let's go ahead and one of the circles, let's go ahead and copy it, select it, and then with Control C, copy it, and Control V or Command paste it. So I'm gonna repeat. I selected a circle, I did Control or Command C, and then Control Command V, and that created a new circle there. And I just clicked it and dragged it so that I would move it out of the way, and I have arranged these circles in this sort of like, doesn't really matter if it looks exactly like this, but kind of like, let's put them next to each other. And you should have 3 circles on your board. So I'm just gonna move them so that, because one of them is kind of like outside of the artboard, just for preference. That's not really important right now. And I should have 3 circles, and then when I click on the circles, you will notice that instead of just like showing me an outline, a green outline on just the circle, it has this like square that shows up around it. That's called the bounding box. The bounding box basically is something that delineates whatever selection you have at the moment. There's no need for you to do that, but I'm gonna select multiple circles just to show you that when I select multiple of them, then my bounding box is like around all of them, right? So whenever you have only one circle selected, let's go ahead and select our leftmost circle. And we can use the bounding box that's very intuitively and with other software to change the dimensions of that circle. So if you click on the edges, when like you see that little arrow, like double-sided arrow, you click and drag, you can actually squish your circle, or like make it taller, and like just basically change the shape of your circle or the size of your circle. If you do the same thing, but you start on the corner, then it allows you to dually change the height and width, and then same thing with, you know, if you go to the right or the left, then it allows you to make it thinner or longer. And then if you approach the bounding box on any of the corners, but not like as close as the actual edge, it will show you the ability to rotate your objects with this little curved arrow. So if you see that little arrow and you click and drag, it'll allow you to, of course, we don't see it because it's a circle, but it allows you to rotate. And so let's go ahead and squish this circle in any way that you want. And let's go ahead and rotate it a little bit. So very simple operation. Now I have more of an ellipse, this shape that is rotated. So when we have selected any of these shapes, you will notice that our right context sensitive panel changes and it shows you a new set of options. So let's go ahead and select our ellipse, or actually let's go ahead and select any of these shapes. And now we're gonna get into like changing colors. So this allows you to, this part that says appearance will allow you to change the properties of your objects. So if you click on the square, the white square that's next to fill, it will open this panel that has some colors available for you. It's just a predetermined set of colors. But you will notice also that there's this sort of like artist palette kind of icon that if you click will give you more options on the color. So I don't know exactly what some of you might be seeing here. So I want to make sure that we're all seeing the same color model. So when you click on the icon, the artist palette kind of icon, after that, go ahead and click on this hamburger menu that's like kind of like tiny, but should be there at the top right. And go ahead and choose HSV as your option. And so that's what I had already, but in case that some of you maybe didn't have it, I just wanted to make sure that you were there. And so HSV is a color model that stands for hue, saturation, and brightness. I like to use it because it's sort of like one of the more intuitive ways to like select a color that you like. Right now, because we are on white color, the hue is all white. So let's go ahead and go to the saturation part, and then like with this little arrow that's underneath the line, move it anywhere that is not all the way to the left. I'm going to move it all the way to the right. So the saturation is now 100%, meaning that whatever hue that I select, as you can see, my hue represents like what we typically know as color. So like, red, like throughout the spectrum. The hue allows you to pick within that spectrum. So if you slide that, it'll go from red to orange to green to blue to magenta to, and then red again. So you can slide that and pick something that you're happy with, and then you can change its saturation. So make it not as intense of whatever hue that is. So it starts becoming more and more white, and then you can also change the brightness. So completely not completely bright or completely dark. If you go all the way, if you want to create black, you just have to go all the way to the left on the B, and then that'll be the black color. So go ahead and pick something that makes you happy with for the fill of your disk. I'm gonna do something like this. And then when you're done, you just have to click out of this panel and it'll go away. So we can do the same thing with the stroke. So the stroke is just the line that is surrounding that circle. Here, we had a black one, and we can click on that square that's next to the word stroke, and then it'll open the same panel. And if we want to make it using the gradients, click on the color mixer, and then it'll allow you to change it. So go ahead and do the same with the stroke. Pick whatever color you want. And then go ahead and do the same with the two other circles, just to get a little bit of practice there. I'm gonna quickly change, the colors for these as well. So you should, at this point, be changing the colors of your circles by selecting them, clicking fill, changing, to whatever it is that you're happy with. And this is not critical to the tutorial, so it's okay if I'm gonna move on soon, but if you haven't done it, it's not gonna change much. So we should have 3 circles or 3 ellipses. It's okay if they don't have different colors. So we're gonna go, and now we're gonna focus on one of them. So we want to zoom in and be working only on the one in the middle. So in order to zoom, like I said earlier, you can use this little magnifying glass here that you can find. If you click it, and then it just allows you to like click and zoom into whatever part of the canvas that you want to zoom in. You can also use Command or Control plus or minus to more quickly. This is what I use all the time to zoom in and out. Right. So if you I think it happens with any tool that you have selected. If you press the space bar on your computer, it should change your cursor to a little hand. And so like with space pressed, you can click and hold and change where you are in the canvas. So let's say that you're zoomed in and you zoomed into a place that you wanted to like just be a little bit on like more focused for your circle to be in the middle. Press space, click and drag, and then you can like move around where you're located. Depending on what type of computer you have, then you can also just use your like scrolling features in your mouse pad to navigate by just like scrolling, by sliding around. We're gonna just be focusing on this circle. So let's try to be kind of like zoomed in to some degree, like maybe something like what I have on my screen. And then I'm gonna just explain to you a little bit about vector, like some of the, how are vector shapes made. I'm gonna do that by using a tool called the direct selection tool. So the black one is just called the selection tool, and then this white one is called direct selection tool. And then I'm going to click on my circle, and you will notice that instead of having that bounding box around it, it just shows me the circle itself, and then it shows me these little squares that are like on each of the edges, like distributed equally around the circle. These things are called anchor points. And whenever I click on an anchor point itself with my direct selection tool, it's gonna show me this other thing that are called handles, anchor handles. And basically, a majority of vector art that you create is defined by anchors that are telling like the computer different sort of like spatial configurations of like what the different components of your shape are. And then how they are, and then the handles are information on how those anchors are connected to each other. So this anchor point is connected to this anchor point, and the way in which this curve is drawn between them depends on the way that these handles are oriented, and then these handles are a way for me to interact with my shape to be able to modify that connection between the anchor points. And so a circle is basically 4 anchor points. I mean, you can create a circle in other ways. You could have like a bunch of anchor points around it, but the simplest way for a circle to be defined would be to have 4 anchor points that are equally distributed with each other, and then they are connected with each other. And again, we're going back to this idea that this is all math. So the math is telling it to create a curve that is like, equally like flowing between the 2 anchor points. So that's it. That's that's what the majority of like what a vector graph visual is. That graph that I showed you, the numbers, all the letters that you type are defined by these anchor points and handles in what is called a Bezier curve. We're not going to get into the details of that, but that's the terminology. And so let's go ahead now and use the direct selection tool so let's click on the direct selection tool, and let's place ourselves so that we can select this anchor specifically. So I have selected my anchor, and what you can see is that when I was using the direct selection tool, I could like change the placement of the entire circle. But if I click with the direct selection tool, only that anchor, I can move that anchor only, right? So now I'm just moving that anchor, and that allows me to manipulate the way that my circle looks in different ways. So I can just like move it here, and now I have a completely different shape because I have only changed the position of that anchor. In addition to that, I can change the length and the angle of the handles by clicking on the handle itself and moving it, such that I can, I can make this curve behave completely differently. The curve that is connecting the anchor point on the left and the anchor point or the right and the top. By just changing, the angle and the length of that anchor or that anchor handle to create, like something completely different. So you didn't have to do any of this. If you didn't do it, that's okay, because we're gonna just like undo that process. So Command or Control Z. If you did change your circle, do that until you have your circle back. And I did want to warn you a little bit, because there's a specific way in which you can like make these direct selections. If you were to not have anything selected, and you go to your circle and you click with the direct selection tool on the side of the circle where there's no anchor, you will actually select what is called a segment, which is this entire part. And I'm going to exemplify to you why this is important by deleting that segment. I selected that segment and I have deleted it. So you now can see that I deleted that curve, but the anchors remained there. And now I have this shape that is like, a circle that has been cut off. I'm gonna undo that. And I want us to go ahead and go to select the anchor itself, the anchor that's all the way to the right, and hit the delete key. So what you should see now is that my circle is only now half a circle. That's because after having deleted that anchor, the only surviving anchors that I have are this one, and this one. And because I deleted that anchor, it has removed the connection between these two. So that's a really important thing. And the fact that this circle is filled in is important for me to illustrate that. You don't see a black line going from here to here, right? That's because this shape, just because the way that Illustrator works, it has not created a new segment that connects these two anchors. It actually, now these anchors are actually not connected to anything, they're only connected to that one in the middle. So this is called, so this circle here, the purple one on my screen, is a closed path, because all the anchors have a connection to at least, I guess 2 others. And then this is an open path, because there are anchors at the ends that are not connected to, that are only connected to another anchor in that shape. This becomes really important in many ways, but not necessarily for the reasons of this tutorial. So I think that's where I'm gonna leave it. But so now everyone should have this circle that is an open path. And we're gonna go ahead, let's see. We're gonna go ahead and see some effects. So let's go and to the normal selection tool and select our circle. That, by clicking that, if you already had something selected, it should be okay. But like, I just want to make sure that everyone has selected the entire circle by going to the direct selection tool and clicking on your half circle. So let's go ahead and select our half circle, and let's go to Effect, 3D and Materials, Revolve. All right. If your computer is old, it might have a little bit of trouble. We're getting into 3D rendering within Illustrator, and that takes more resources. So this might get slower for some of you. But once you do that, you should see something like this, which is, it looks like a cylinder. Depending on what, depending on what stroke you had, you might be able to see that this is actually polo. But basically this Revolve tool allows you to take any of the 2-dimensional shapes that you have created and turn it into a 3-dimensional shape by doing an operation in which it takes this edge, it takes this edge here, and then it's revolving this shape that you had all the way 360 in a 3-dimensional manner, like with the screen, going deep into the screen as our axis. And then you can see how basically if I had this half circle, by doing that operation, you then have like a cylinder that has some hollowness to it, because this part, this curve here is not going to be filled. So the next thing that we're going to do is we don't want a cylinder, we wanted a sphere. So we're going to go into this panel here, allows you to change the axis that the side that you're using, offset direction from, and we're going to change it to right edge instead of the left edge, right? And so it created a sphere, but because my stroke was black, mine just looks like a circle. I'm going to change my stroke real quick so that, like, what I'm showing you illustrates a little bit better that it's a sphere. And you should all have now a sphere on your screen. It might look a little bit pixelated, which of course is what I've been telling you all about vectors. That's because it hasn't been rendered on the yet. Don't worry if it looks pixelated. And I'm not gonna like talk about like the rendering aspect, that's a little bit more advanced. I'm just gonna render it myself so that you see like that it actually is like you know, a smooth sphere and not like not a bunch of pixels. So now we have a sphere. And what I want you to do real quick is I want you to play around with the revolve function with your two other shapes that you have on the screen. So just select them, go to Effect, 3D and Materials, Revolve, and see what you get. I'm gonna do the same myself. And if things get too crowded, remember you're zoom in and out. My full circle, as you might expect, becomes a torus, just because you're revolving a circle around, fully 360. And then the tilted ellipse became something, like whatever that revolving that would achieve. Whatever you did, let's go ahead and do Control Z just to undo the transformations that you did on the two outermost ones. Let's just stay with the sphere, the middle sphere. I'm gonna zoom in again, like I zoomed out, so I'm gonna zoom in again to my middle sphere. This panel is kind of bothering me, and I'm not gonna use it anymore. But I'm just gonna I do want to mention that this is a kind of pretty robust. I mean, it's if you want to do like real 3D. Do things like Blender. This is a software for doing 3D modeling and stuff like that. But this is a pretty okay and like pretty nice tool for doing 3D stuff that will allow you to change the like the materials that it's using to like the material of the actual object, change the lighting source and like where it's coming from, change the angle of it and like rotate it in space and all of that. So we're not gonna go over that maybe in an advanced tutorial, but just make you aware that this is available for you. But for now, I don't need to do anything else with my sphere, so I'm gonna close it. And now I have a sphere here, right? So we wanna give it like a spin. And so we're gonna go ahead and use another tool here on the left, which is the line segment tool. You should find it on the right side of the panel or down. It just looks like a line. And if you click it, it will allow you to draw lines. So I'm gonna click that and then click and hold in my canvas and make like a vertical line that sort of crosses through my sphere. It's okay if it's not like centered like mine was, that's fine. You can move it afterwards as with the direct selection tool. But I'm just gonna draw like a line that goes through the middle of my sphere. Again, if I want to make sure that it's very much like pretty much a straight line, I can hold Shift. So Shift before was restraining the dimensions of our circle, but here it's going to restrain the angle of our line. So if I hold Shift, it doesn't let me like move it. It's just going to like make it a vertical line. And you don't have to do that, but I'm gonna do that so that it's like perfectly vertical. And you will notice that whatever the properties of your line are whatever properties you were using already. So my line is like it's like this sort of like pinkish color because whatever stroke I was using before was pink. So this is just something to keep in mind when you're using Illustrator. You might want to make sure that like you have the stroke and fill selected that you want your shape to take, or just be prepared to modify it after. Like I'm gonna do now, because I did not want my line to be pink. I wanted it to be black. So I'm just gonna go ahead and select it. So I went to this direct selection tool, selected my line, maybe I adjusted it a little bit, make sure that it's centered or whatever, and then I'm gonna go to the stroke. Property with the color, and I'm gonna move it all the way to black. So if you want your line to be black, repeat this as I did. And now I have a black line. You will notice that the stroke, the color fill, or the word fill doesn't have an underline, but the word stroke has an underline. That means that you can actually go in there, like it has more stuff inside. So if you click the word stroke with your line selected, you'll see it opens up a new menu that will allow us to create arrows. So you can go to down to arrowheads, and you can give it an arrowhead. So go ahead and do that. Give your line whatever arrowhead looks nice to you. So if you did it as I did, you should see that your line has an arrowhead on the top. You can give it an arrowhead on the other side by using the arrowhead pull down menu that's at the other to the right. But I want it to be on the top. I'm giving it an upward spin. And then you can do this or not if you want to, but we're gonna undo it anyway. I just wanted to show you that here's where you also can create dashed lines. So by clicking on this little box that says dash line, that's where I create a dash. And you can change the size of your dashes, the size of your gaps, and also give your dash line like multiple sizes of dashes and gaps within the same line, like alternating by using these little boxes that say dash gap, dash gap, dash gap, and entering there like a size, like here it's points, 12 points. But I don't want my spin arrow to have a dash, so I'm gonna undo it. I just wanted to show you that property. And so in principle, you should have this arrow that is on top of your sphere. It's just like kind of like going across it, but it looks like it's on top. So we're gonna now go back to the layers panel, which I have had open all this time. And by the way, you could have hidden it if it was bothering you, like you just click it in and out whenever you want to use it or not. But if you had it closed, then go back to the layers panel, and you will see that if you open up the contents of layer 3, everything that we have created is its own individual object within that layer. If you were following the steps like I did, including the line, the ellipse, the other ellipse that we made 3D, and then the other ellipse that we tilted and that we squished and tilted. And you will, this will allow you to notice that the position of these layers on the layer panel are what tell Illustrator where the objects are located in the depth of your document, okay? Because my arrow is on top in this layer panel, it's on top of all of the ellipses, it's showing up on the front. But I want it to be behind the sphere. So I'm just gonna go ahead and click on the line here, like you can just use the word line, like click on the word line and click, hold, and drag it down. You see my operation here, what I'm doing. And as long as you move it under the sphere itself, you should see that now your arrow is behind it, right? Like now you have moved it in space in the depth of your artboard to the back, and now your arrow is behind your sphere. And this is looking a little bit better, a little bit closer to like whenever people make little like spin, like particles with spin diagrams. But we want to have just a slightly more refined look to this. And because we're like 3 minutes away from the end of the tutorial, I'm just gonna show you. I'm not gonna go like super slow. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna direct select the arrow. I'm going to increase its thickness by going to this item here next to the stroke. Our third property is the thickness, and I'm gonna increase it. So now my arrow is a little bit thicker. This is just for aesthetic purposes. I'm going to select my arrow, I'm gonna copy it, and I'm going to paste it, but instead of pasting it with Command B, I'm gonna do this other type of pasting, which is paste in place. So that basically what that does is that it exactly where it was, it's going to create a new copy of it instead of pasting it like on the side or something like that. And in my panel, you're gonna see that now I have another arrow that it created, and it, whenever you paste something, it pastes it like on the top, like up to the front of your document. So in my layers panel, you will see that that's that's showing up at the top. And I'm going to using the same sort of like squishing technique, I'm gonna like squish my arrow, but only the one that's in the front, and I'm gonna squish it up to like maybe here. So that now I have sort of this illusion that my arrow, because I have one behind and I have one in front, that's sort of like going through across my, it's like piercing the sphere, right? It's just a visual illusion, but it just adds a little bit of a nice element to it. Okay. So we actually did pretty well in time, except I missed a few things that I wanted to discuss. I wanted to discuss that you obviously can create text. So there's a tool here with that has a T. It's a T. You can use it to, you click it, you then click in your document, and it allows you to like type things. Whenever you create text, you can do whatever you want with the text in all the properties that we looked at. You can resize it, you can change its color. You can add a stroke to it if you wanted to for some reason. I'm gonna make it shorter because otherwise my computer will go crazy, but you can revolve it. That doesn't look as fun because that's stroke like, but right, you can like revolve your text for whatever reason. So it's a vector element in there, and you can do whatever you want to it, like the same properties. So you can add text. This is useful for you to like, add axes, labels, and different things in your plots and all that you have in your document. And the last thing that I wanted to show you is that, of course, once you're done with your whatever you created, you can export it. So there are different ways to kind of like take things out of Illustrator. You can save something as, if you say save as, it will allow you to export it as an EPS, like we talked EPS, right? As a PDF, as an SVG. And if you go to export as, it will allow you to export it as, of course, you can also export things as not vector files like JPEGs, PNGs, stuff like that. But it will allow you, again, to do SVG. It will allow you to do EMF, WMF. So the different things that we talked about, you have the option to export it as. So apologies for having to rush this last part, but this is recorded, and if you want to go back and like look at it with a little bit more intentionality, it's going to be available. Then the last thing is that, if this had gone quicker, what I was going to do is that you were gonna practice. I was gonna have you pick between one of these three different things that I'm displaying here on the screen, and just try to create it. With the tools that I gave you today, that I showed you today, you should be able to create the majority of what these things are. I had to rush through and not explain transparency, but that's pretty much the only thing that you would have needed for this one. And like creating sinusoid shapes, that's another like tool that I wasn't going to cover today. But other than those two things, you should be able to create pretty much this. Other than these blurry things, you should be able to create this by revolving and rotating and stuff like that. And then this one is the simplest one. You should be able, like, this should be really straightforward. Of course, these different harmonic levels those would have been imported, those are found in the files that I gave you, I just created plots for each of them in MATLAB, and then what you would have done is deleted the axes and then like reshape them and like shrink them and all, and then change their color. So just to go back to and circle back to, and I'm gonna be done soon. My plot is also, you know, a vector element in this document, and I can do whatever I want to it. So I can select the actual curve. I can change the thickness of the stroke. I can change the color of the stroke. I can do whatever I want to it, right? Of course, this goes with the warning that this is data and you don't want to manipulate your data in ways that are not like systematically done with plotting software, right? So be careful, you know, if you make a plot really thick, it's going, and it had like error bars, that makes a difference, right? So like keep in mind, you know, this is powerful, but you have to be really cautious about the way in which you manipulate any actual plots that you import in here. But with that said, I think I'm done. I'm happy to stay here and answer questions. And yeah, let's see what we do for part 2 with getting more advanced.